Patrick Daniel, Randy Canchi, and Cindy Langston, and we are joined by Judge Phyllis Frye today. Um, for lack of an easier way to put it, the transgender pioneer, and the first transgender judge in the United States, and a leader in transgender rights. Judge Frye, welcome.
Well, thank you. Actually, yes, I am the first out transgender judge in the United States, but that's been quite a few years. And every once in a while, whenever I'm on something like this or something else, or I'm out public speaking or I'm on the internet, I started saying I'm the first one in the world. And you know how the internet is. If you say something that's not true, you'll get lambasted. I've never had anyone contradict that. So there it is.
Well, every day we learn a little something new about all of our guests. And, I was reading a little bit about you earlier, and to put it mildly, you have had probably the most interesting life of anyone that I've interviewed on this show. I mean, the tribulations and the trials that you have been to have been innumerable. Um, Starting out with kind of a broad question, I guess, can you tell me what in your life has been probably the most difficult part of the struggle?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. You stumped me, and I don't get stumped very easily. Most difficult part. Well, it's all been difficult. You just gotta, as I tell people, if you're a trans woman, you just gotta put on your big girl panties and go forward. And so I go forward, and I don't go back. Never have. I think a lot of it has to do with my background in scouting and the fact that I'm an Eagle Scout. I went to Texas A&M. I was in the Corps Cadets, and my parents, even though my parents threw me away after I transitioned, they really put a sense of tenacity in me. I get tenacity from them. I get loyalty from them, even though in the end they weren't loyal to me. And I get honesty from them. So that's how I grew up.
Um, I can't imagine what a struggle it was to be put in that position by your parents. We talked a little bit off the air about, the variety of struggles that you've been to. And as you said, you know, you've been through good times, you've been through bad times, from being forced to resign from the army and those sorts of things. Um, can you tell, I guess, the audience about your history and kind of where you started and where you are today and a little bit about that struggle?
Yes, I can give a quick review. I will say that anyone who wants to know the full story, if they will simply Google New York Times colon Phyllis Frye, it'll pop up immediately. Actually, I was on the front page above the fold of a Sunday edition of the New York Times in August of 2015. And it's a very extensive article with pictures. And my book has already been written and submitted to the publisher. We'll see when that comes out. But, I started out like most kids. I'm a middle child. I grew up in San Antonio. Um, from the age of 4 or 5, I knew that I preferred girl things over boy things. But, parents and uncles and aunts and older brother and all that other stuff, when you pick up a doll, they say, no, that's for girls. Here, have a gun or have a truck or something like that. You pick up all these cues, and you know that if you don't want to be fussed at and you want to be accepted, that you conform. And so I conformed. I was a brilliant actress. I'm an Eagle Scout. I went to A&M. I was in the Corps in high school. I went into engineering. I did all the things that I was expected to do as a boy, even though I would much rather been in the Girl Scouts. Instead of being RTC commander, I would much rather been a cheerleader. Um, and engineering's okay. I enjoyed engineering. Um, so when I finally transitioned, my first wife left me, and the military ran me out, and I fought and got an honorable discharge. And then I practiced engineering, and I got my engineering license. And practiced engineering for a number of years. I met my current wife. We had our anniversary yesterday, 47 years. She stayed with me through the whole ball of wax. Anyway, I practiced engineering, and then I could not deny Phyllis anymore. So I transitioned in 76. And it was so interesting when the SCOTUS decision came out Monday a week ago.
Mhm.
I've been thinking about it a lot because yesterday on our anniversary, June 23rd, in 1976, was the day that my 2 weeks notice was over. I was fired 2 weeks prior to that, and you give them 2 weeks notice. And so my very last day was our anniversary. Wasn't that nice? So I went to the EEOC and filed a complaint, and they investigated it. And they said, yes, absolutely, you've been discriminated against, but a recent federal appellate court came out, says transgenders aren't covered under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Plus the fact that in Houston, there was a law until I was able to lobby city council and get it off the books in 1980 that made cross-dressing subject to arrest. So I had to deal with that. Had to deal with the neighbors, a few good neighbors. Most of the neighbors were really ugly. We had our house egged. We had our tires slashed. We had the spray paint graffiti on the driveway. At Christmas and Easter, we got the bulk of the obscene phone calls. But we stayed with it, and I used my GI Bill to go to law school, became a lawyer. No one in the community, because there were some gay and lesbian lawyers in Houston at the time, no one would hire me. And so I did the best I could. My wife was a school teacher, and she was scared to death that they would find out about me because she taught in Fort Bend County, that's Tom DeLay's district. And she was afraid she'd lose her job. And of course, she was not protected either. She would not have been able to use Title VII to protect her job either. So we lived off of her income, which was about a third of what our combined income had been. We learned how to conserve. We turned our air conditioner off for 10 years because that cut the electric bill. I learned how to sew clothes to save money. We drank powdered milk instead of regular milk to save money. We did a lot of things. The first Christmas after I transitioned, our church on Christmas Eve brought us a great big box of canned and boxed food because we were the poor family in the church at the time. So we struggled, and then in I was bitter, by the way. I was very bitter. I can't even begin to tell you how bitter I was.
I can't imagine why. I mean, my God.
And in law school, I fought the Christian Legal Society for 3 years. They were horrible. And finally, I was able to get them put on campus-wide probation for discrimination, which was a victory. Passed the bar the first time I took it. Anyways, in 1986, I had a gay Air Force sergeant call me. He'd been arrested outside of a bar, and he was scared to death for DWI. He was scared to death he was going to be run out of the military. He wanted to know if I could plead him guilty and keep it out of the newspaper. And I thought to myself while I was talking to him on the phone, how in the hell can I screw up a guilty plea? And I couldn't think of a way to screw up a guilty plea. So I told him to bring $400 to the courthouse, and I pled him out, and he was happy. And I bought my first ad in, some of y'all remember this bar guide called Twit, This Week in Texas. And that's where I bought my first ad. And about a year later, my friend Ray Hill, he suggested to me that I go to some of the criminal courts in Harris County and meet with some of the judges that I had screened as part of the then gay political caucus for political office. And so they knew me. And bing, light bulb went off. I'd never thought about that. So I went to several of the judges, and they knew me, and they gave me a chance. And within a year, I was full-time criminal practice. And Trish and I never trusted my income because I'd lost several careers. And so what we did was we didn't spend my income. We paid off the mortgage, we paid off the car, and we started putting the money away, which is why we can afford to live in the senior living center where we live now. And so I practiced criminal law for over 30 years. And then in 1989, around then, I started getting calls from transgender people, and I started taking them through the court. And I got their names changed, and then I figured out how to argue to change their gender, even though there was no law on that. I was able to convince the judges that that was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, I was fighting for transgender inclusion. The Gay Political Caucus accepted me, but they were not going to fight for transgender. The state Democratic Party accepted me, but they weren't going to fight for transgender. None of the national organizations around the country were inclusive of transgender. And so I started in 1991, or ended up being the International Conference on Transgender Law and Employment Policy. And we had 6 conferences, and I trained all of the future transgender lawyers or their descendants. You can, almost any transgender lawyer or advocate for transgender rights that you meet today, you can trace back maybe 5 or 6 generations, but it's all going to come down to me. In 1995, I declared war on the Human Rights Campaign because they kept us out of the INDA bill, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and that fight went on until 2008 when they finally agreed to accept transgender. And that's why when I sent you that email yesterday, I said that there's no doubt that sexual orientation would have been covered in the SCOTUS decision. That if I had not started 44 years ago pushing for transgender inclusion in all the different ways that I did, and all the people that I trained didn't pick up the mantle, the T word, gender identity, transgender, would not have been in that case and would not have been in that decision.
I mean, that's really profound. I mean, you know, we, I guess today take it for granted because T has always effectively been included in the struggle.
No.
But obviously that's not the case, nor has it been the case for the majority of the struggle, it sounds like. I'm going to turn it over to these guys in a second, but I wanted to ask you one more question. Why do you think it was so difficult for, you know, the gay rights community to include the transgender component in their struggle initially? Obviously, it's not something where they don't want to be inclusive, I wouldn't imagine, but what was your assessment of why it took the level of persistence that it took from you to have that band of unity with them?
Well, I think, I was told several different times. I was told by people in the Houston Gay Political Caucus, which became eventually the GLBT Political Caucus, but I was told when I really pushed hard in 1990 for transgender inclusion in the bylaws that transgenders were welcome in the fight, but they didn't consider us as part of the community. They considered the transgender community to be heterosexual. They did not consider the transgender community to be incorporated with the drag community,
Mm-hmm.
even though the Stonewall Rebellion, the first people, they always talk about um, throwing the first bricks in Stonewall. It was actually transgender people who threw the first high heel shoes at the police. That's Stonewall. But it goes back that far. And then with HRC and the end of bill in 1995, I was just told directly by the executive director then, who is a friend of mine now, that they considered us a liability to getting the bill passed. And every time there was a pride parade, whether it was in Houston or anywhere else, and the pictures came out the next day in the newspaper, it was all the drag queens. And I call them the wealthy gay and lesbians, the Gucci shoe wearing people, they considered us an embarrassment. And I heard that a lot. And so it was a real fight. But in 2008, and one of the people we fought for years was Barney Frank, who has since come around. But I lost my train of thought. But they didn't want us in that bill because they thought we would drag it down. And in 2008, they introduced a new bill. Barney Frank was going to introduce a new bill. And when I say we, all the people that I had taught and trained and brought along, and the ones that they had taught and trained and brought along over the years, there was a revolt in the national, regional, and local community. The only people who stood with keeping transgenders out in 2008 were HRC and Log Cabin Republicans. All of the other organizations, I'm talking about National Center for Lesbian Rights, GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, you name it, regional organizations, local, they all said, no, 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 this time we're going to include transgenders. So 2008 was when sexual orientation became part of the language and part of the fight nationally. And I was dealing with a lot of health issues. And so I just kind of backed out after 2008. And then in 2010, Mayor Parker made me a judge.
Cindy, Randy, you guys have some questions for Judge Frye? I could kind of ask her a litany of stuff, but I don't want to monopolize.
Yeah, Judge, no, thank you for that. And I read the article, is beautiful. And one thing that I looked at in reading all the filibuster articles and the articles about you is this continual pattern of really pain, right? And as a gay man, I look back in my life and I think this pattern of pain and kind of the recovery of it, you sit back and you think, what effect does that have on my life? So my question to you is, do you take back any of that pain that you had growing up, or has that pain manifested in you becoming the advocate and the success that you are? How do you feel about that?
No, I don't take any of it back. The two people who are writing my biography, if the title stays the same, if the publisher doesn't change it, it's going to be titled Her Honor, which is kind of an interesting thing since I'm a judge. But you can't change anything, because if you change something, it affects everything. I don't regret being married the first time. I don't regret having my son. I don't regret losing my son, unfortunately. Everything that I went through either strengthened me or gave me a life lesson or steeled me. Steel is made by a constant hammering of hot metal. And you just can't change anything. You have to go with what you're dealt and do the best that you can. So, yeah, I did go through a lot of pain. I was bitter for a long time. I was angry. But, the joke's on everybody else that attacked me, because take my neighbors, for instance. They were so ugly to us. 20 years later, they'd either gotten over it, moved, or died. And the neighborhood got real nice. In fact, I was appointed to an unfulfilled term as secretary of the Civic Club, and I was reelected 9 consecutive times. The only reason why I left was because when I became the City of Houston judge, and the Civic Club would adopt a position that was contrary to the city, I had a conflict of interest signing the minutes as the secretary. But, and for instance, right now, I'm in a senior living facility. And when I got here, I had the New York Times article. I made quite a few of them on flash drive. And I just started handing those babies out, because I knew the word was going to get around about who I was. And I wanted the correct word to get around. And I wanted the word to get around that I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not afraid of who I am. And Trish and I are just really loved around here, very well accepted. So, you just got to hold your head up high and keep walking.
Yeah, well said. Cindy?
Your Honor, first, I love the play on words of the title or potential title to your book. It's beautiful. And I had 2 thoughts. I guess one is just from a human standpoint, anyone reading your story and the tribulations you've endured, and you talk so openly about going through times of being so bitter about it. How did you, for anyone who endures struggles like you have, how did you not get sucked into that dark hole during the thick of it and the bitterness, to walk through it to be who you are today? Because I think so many people get lost in that.
My wife stayed with me. My wife took care of me. My wife held me when I cried. My wife encouraged me. She never let me down. And everything that I took, she took. Because, when the ordinance, the cross-dressing ordinance was in effect, every day she went off to work, she didn't know when she came home if I was going to be in jail. And when our house was attacked, she was there, part of it. And one night, some young Republicans, and I know this for sure because of how it happened, they came over to our house and started ringing the doorbell and screaming and hollering. Well, I was still at school, at the law school, and so she was there by herself. And when I got home, she'd call my neighbors, my next door neighbors, who were nice to us, and he and his son were standing outside the house with a shotgun guarding the house. And she was in the house holding our rifle that we had by the barrel. She was going to use it as a club. She was terrified, and it took her months to get over that. But I survived because of Trish, and Trish is in the book. She's not a public person, but the authors, Mike and Shay, they both told her, you're in the book, like it or not. And so she's in the book and she's accepted that.
Judge, have you ever seen, oh, go ahead. Cindy.
Go ahead, Randy.
There's a movie I saw, I think it was about 10 years ago. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Normal with Tom Wilkins.
Yeah.
Oh, if Patrick and Cynthia, if you guys haven't seen it, it's with Tom Wilkinson and Hayden Panettiere and what's the actress's name?
Jessica Tandy. No, not Jessica Tandy. The one that was in Tootsie.
Jessica Lange.
Jessica Lange.
Yeah. And it's this incredible movie, and what I loved about it so much was Tom Wilkinson, he and his wife, Jessica Lange, had been married for 20-something years. They live in the Midwest, Bible Belt, small little community. They're very involved in the church. And he decides to tell her one day that he wants to transition.
Yep.
It's this beautiful story about this typical family that lives sort of in the Bible Belt. And whether she wants to leave Tom Wilkinson or not, he's still in love with her, but he wants to transition to a woman. And it's such a beautiful movie that very few people know about because it's so powerful because of where it comes from. It's not like this is a family out of San Francisco that's liberal, lives in Oakland kind of deal. And I loved that movie so much, and I couldn't help but think, and the name of it was Normal. So when I read the New York Times article, the last thing that was said in the article was, you say whatever normal means. And what I love about that so much is the fact that we're redefining that right now more than ever. One mom, two dads, transgender parents, a straight couple, regardless of race, regardless of national origin. And that is becoming the new normal. In your life, you've seen, I mean, I'm 40, I've been out 16 years, but in your life, the things that you've seen, I can't help but be happy that this new normal is so amorphous, right? That
Yeah.
we're defining that. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree. I'm very pleased with the way things, are going. We've still got a big fight ahead of us. There's a lot of people that would just as soon see us die, and that ain't gonna happen. There's just too many of us. I think that's what surprised the most people is that when we finally started coming out of the closet, people know trans people. They didn't know they knew trans people. People know lesbian, gay, bisexual. They didn't know they knew that. One thing that has really come home to me, and I'm glad that I'm going to be able to say this before we run out of time, is this whole race thing has happened. And, it's long overdue. And I'm waiting on Amazon to deliver my Black Lives Matter t-shirt because I want to wear it. And I'm so proud of what they're doing. And if I wasn't in this facility, because of COVID, we're pretty much locked in here for our own protection. But if it weren't for that, when the protest over Mr. Floyd and the funeral service happened, Trish and I have both been out there marching. And I'm so glad to see so many people of other races other than Black. Now, it's all the same, we have the same enemy. And the same enemy is ignorance and hatred. We all have the same enemy. But this is the fight that needs to be fought now. Black lives do matter.
Cindy, did you have something?
From a legal standpoint, I wonder if you have an opinion about the fact that, in my mind, the fact that Gorsuch wrote the Supreme Court opinion is maybe indicative of the ease with which we move forward in a less defining way.
Well, you know as well as I do that when we were waiting on decision, everybody in the country was just holding their breath, waiting for the 5-4 to go the other way. I mean, we were. And so I was at the Methodist Hospital on that morning because my wife was getting her biweekly infusion of cancer drug, and I saw the decision, and it said 6-3. And MSNBC, which we had on in the room, hadn't even come on yet. I mean, about the decision. I said 6-3. I said 6-3. And I looked at Trish and I said, there are 4 assholes on the Supreme Court. Which one turned? See, when you're 72, you can say things like that. Which one turned? And I couldn't figure out which one did turn. But he's got to have transgender people in his family, or he went to high school, or he went to college. He knows transgender people. And they can say he's a textualist and all this other stuff. He knows transgender people. Got to. It was a surprise.
It was a
6-3.
He's a pleasant sleeper. It's like when you get that person on the jury that you say, yes, they were quiet and they ended up giving you the judgment that you wanted. It's great. It's great.
Well, you remember when Bowers, and I can't think of the name of the justice. It was a swing justice at the time. And he said that he didn't know any gay people. And his chief assistant was a closeted gay man. And because he was closeted, that justice didn't know. And that's the whole deal about coming out of the closet.
Judge, I have a question about when the transition, for lack of a better way to say it, manifested itself. At that point, you were married to Trish, is that right?
Correct. 3 years we were married.
I can't imagine having a more difficult conversation with someone. Can you give me, and I realize this is personal, but I think it's really going to help people understand,
Well, I'll answer
how
the question.
significant of a decision it was.
She knew before we got married what might happen, because I was so confused. I didn't tell my first wife because I thought it would go away. Well, it didn't go away. But Trish, I told her what might happen. And so she thought about it a long time. And she's older than I am. And she said, I've dated, I've been around, and if that's all that's wrong with you, I'm going to take a chance. And when I did go to transition, she was under a terrible amount of pressure from her family. Her family has since come around. My family never did, but her family has since come around. She was under tremendous pressure. And as she will tell you, it was the kind of pressure that either jams you together or pulls you apart. And it just jammed us together and made us stronger.
That's amazing, because I obviously, from everything that I've read and from you talking about it, she's had a pretty profound influence on your life as your support system, I would have to think. And I was told we are sending you a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. So
hey, team. So I'll get it before Amazon drops it off. Good.
Well, I think it probably has Patrick Daniel Law written on it somewhere, but since you're not technically on the bench anymore, I think we're safe.
No, I am on the bench, but that's okay.
We'll just have to be selective about what you can wear.
I haven't sat on the bench since Trish had her, since we discovered the cancer in her brain.
Yes.
We'll just be careful where we file. How about
That's
that?
right.
Be careful.
I don't want recusal. Judge, there's a lot of questions, so I want to take some questions from our viewers. One of the ones I just saw from someone named Tanner Luna is, how has your status as a transgender person ultimately affected your decision making on the bench?
Oh, not at all, because I'm a City of Houston Municipal Court judge. It's my court. We do traffic tickets. So it doesn't affect anything. Every once in a while, somebody will come through traffic court that I know. And when that happens, I just send them to another judge. And every once in a while, a obviously transgender person comes through, and you know, we're talking about, are you going to do deferred disposition? Are you going to do defensive driving course? Are you going to pay the fee? And so it's just not relevant.
How has it shaped your thinking as a legal advocate? Because I think the one thing that's become loud and clear is that you embrace the role as counselor at law, as a heavy part of the, job that you undertake every day. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I practice law like an engineer because that's the way I think. I'm an engineer. I'm a problem solver. And when I did criminal defense law for those 30 plus years, it used to drive the prosecutors nuts because they'd say, you don't try a case like a lawyer does. And I say, no, I'm an engineer. I'm a problem solver. I look at your case, I look at your facts, I look at your offense report, and I seek to find out what the problem is with your case, and then I attack it. And I'm sorry, but I'm still an engineer, even though I have a law license.
Well, that makes sense. Uh, Lauren?
Yes. So we have another question from Kid Vicious saying, what is the next frontier in the fight for equality?
Well, I write about this in the afterword to the book. The next frontier is elder care for transgender people because of financial and because of health reasons. Most people who transition, whether it's male to female or female to male, either don't or can't afford, or for whatever reason, get all of the surgery below the waist that they want. And so when you go into a nursing home, and you are having to depend upon people to bathe you and to catheterize you and to clean you up, and most of these people are low wage earners, and a lot of them are going to want to save your soul. I was in the hospital in 2001 with a mini stroke, and I had to chase a lot of people out of my room who came to preach to me. But they're going to get microaggressions every day. They're going to be called by the wrong pronoun. They're going to be called by the wrong name. They're going to be kind of snickered at, and those things add up. Whenever I visit transgender people in nursing homes, even if they've had all of their surgery, they are terrified that somebody there will be able to realize that I am transgender, and therefore they must be transgender. And elder care of transgender people is really the next fight that has to be fought. And that's what I wrote about in the afterword to my book.
Genesis Perez asks, what ways can we incorporate transgender rights advocacy, allyship, or movement building into our own lives?
I'm not sure what that means. Help me.
I'll read it again, Judge. What are the ways that we can incorporate transgender rights advocacy, allyship, or movement building into someone's own life?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I guess it's like me wearing a Black Lives t-shirt, a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. You've just got to, whenever you hear someone say something that's anti-trans, anti-Black, anti-gay, anti-lesbian, it's so easy. You say to yourself, well, I don't want to get into that right now. And so you just let it pass. You've got to say something.
It's funny
That's
that
the
you
only
say
answer
that.
I can think of.
It's funny you say that, Judge. I saw a meme yesterday where somebody put for Black Lives Matter. They said, "Right now, don't be nice, extra nice to your 3 Black friends. Correct your 60 white friends that aren't doing the right thing." And I think that was so truthful, because it's like, yeah, we need to advocate more. You need to stop the behavior. If you see someone who is being negative to someone who is trans, don't be nice to the trans person. Defend them and educate really that person and not to do that. That's not okay behavior.
You're absolutely right. It's just so easy. It's human nature to walk away from a fight that's not your fight. You just can't do that, because if you do, we'll have the same shit that we've been having for 401 years.
Judge, if there's one thing, we're coming to the close of the time that they allot us for the interview, but the one thing I'd like to ask is, what is the one thing that you want to tell people out there about the transgender movement, so that everybody can be more aware of how they can have an impact?
Well, we are here. We are queer. Get used to us.
Well put and very succinct. Thank you for your time, Judge. To put it mildly, you have one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard of.
Such a pleasure.
And thank you for your service, from an Eagle Scout to the military as a cadet and on the bench. We greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you. It's been fun.
Yes, ma'am. And we'll have your shirt to you shortly.
Great, great. And how do I get a copy of this so I can send it to people?
I will let our media team get that to you. That's above my pay grade, Judge. I'm going to have somebody reach out to you and get it to you, though.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.